Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve Patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartra sutrasya bhashyasya kramat vivaranasya cha. Now you would remember that we were dealing with the early sutras of the Sadhanapada, that is, in the printed book you find this in the second chapter. In the Sadhanapada, there are three main topics that are discussed. One important topic is Kriya Yoga, that we already discussed. The second topic that is discussed is what sometimes called Dukha Chadurvyuha. It's under the quadrangle of Dukkha. That means, you gradually will understand. We often try to do various spiritual practices. There are obstacles, sometimes external and internal obstacles. And what is this Dukkha? What is this? That whole phenomenon is sometimes called, designated as Dukkha. Different obstacles. So it is sometimes called the quadrangle of Dukkha or Dukkha Chadurvyuha. A quadrangle with 4 elements. One is the obstacles and problems that may arise in future, which is to be eradicated. It's called Heya. You find in the traditional books, you find this Heya. It means that which is to be eradicated. We cannot solve the problems that emerged in the past. To make this point, I shall explain. I shall give the background. Perhaps a little bit of background is necessary to explain this. You know, we already discussed Kriya Yoga. Tapaswadhyaya, Ishwar Panidhani, Pradhani, Kriya Yoga. We also discussed different obstacles, psychological obstructions that we have to face. And we also discussed how different tendencies and impressions, vasanas, are accumulated in the mind stuff, in the chittam, and how these tendencies and impressions that may have originated with our past actions in the past lives, how they cause jati ayur bhoga, means our birth, then our lifespan, and also the various experiences that we have to undergo in this life. Whatever we experience in this life, including lifespan, and also the kind of birth that we get, all these are more or less influenced by the accumulated karmas, obstacles, tendencies, impressions that we have gathered from past life. So long as these kleshas exist, they have to be experienced in the form of the result. They will fructify at one point in future. Now, these experiences, birth, lifespan, and various types of experiences, can be analyzed from 2 angles. There may be in the form of positive merits, there may be in the form of negative demerits. Those who have accumulated a lot of demerits will have to experience things in accordance to, in relation to what they have done in the past. So among this, birth is is absolute. I mean, there is no option for you for that. What we are going to do in this life, there is an option. We have freedom to do or not to do. We have freedom as to how we are going to go about our duties and responsibilities. So whatever we are going to achieve through effort, there is an option. There is a possibility for improvement. There is a possibility for change. But birth itself is certain. Now, all these are discussed in the 13th and 14th sutra of Sadhanapada. I think some of you may remember. So all these kleshas, tendencies, impressions, samskaras that we have accumulated in the chittam, in the mind stuff, have to be experienced either as pleasant experiences or unpleasant experiences. That's why it is, or you find in all religious traditions, in one way or other, a simple principle. You have to be careful what you do to others, because that will come back to you. It may not be today or tomorrow. In many cases it will be in this life. In very many cases it could be in future life. So this is the basic principle of ethics. Fear of God, fear of going to hell, all these things are there. The temptation of going to heaven, everything is there. But there is an underlying principle in all religious traditions. Wherever spiritual, ethical, philosophical ideas are discussed, you always find in all doctrines, in all holy books, the same basic idea. Be careful what you do to others, because it will come back to you, one way or other. So often when we sometimes encounter unpleasant experiences, we sometimes cannot explain it logically. So once we understand that it's coming back to you, something we have given to somebody, it is coming back to you in another form. There's a warning, and also there's a scope for improvement, for improving our own future. So this is a point, remember. Sadhanapada, the second chapter, deals with three main topics. One, Kriya Yoga, we already discussed. From first sutra, which defined Kriya Yoga, Tapas Swadhyaya, Isvara Pradhanani, Kriya Yoga, we already discussed. We discussed Tapa, what is Swadhyaya, Isvara Pradhana, everything we discussed. And also we discussed the avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, panchaklesha, the five important kleshas, obstructions. That also we discussed. And we also discussed how vrittis emerge, how vrittis are formed, how action produces vrittis, vrittis produce samskaras, samskaras lead to formation of vasanas, attitudes and aptitudes, and how vasanas decide how we react to external circumstances. And that produce actions, and actions again produce vrittis, the cycle continues. All this we discussed. The second important topic discussed in the second chapter is, as I said, Dukkha Chadurvyuha, the quadrangle of Dukkha, divided into four important elements. One is Heya, that which is to be eradicated. The future Dukkha has to be eradicated. If you are wise, if we learn our lessons from the past, we can avoid unpleasant experiences repeating themselves. The second, Heya Hetu, the cause of Dukkha, association between the drashta and drishya, seer and seen, cause of this association is avidya. This is from the Vedantic point of view, and this also from the yoga point of view. There are minor differences. From Vedantic point of view, the fundamental cause is avidya. We understand ourselves to be the psychophysical mechanism. So whatever affects the body and mind we take very seriously, and that upsets our mind. The moment we realize that we are something beyond the psychophysical mechanism, then immediately the veil is removed, the truth is revealed, we understand that we are something beyond the psychophysical mechanism. We cannot run away from the body and mind that belong to us rather, but at the same time, we will have a much more intelligent way of dealing with the problems that affect the mind and body. That's a basic wisdom of spirituality. Spirituality doesn't ask you to run away from the realities of worldly life, but it teaches you to face the realities of worldly life in a much more intelligent, much more rational way. Which called spirituality is nothing but enlightened reason. Spirituality is not opposed to reason, it's an enlightened reason, this idea behind it. The third factor is hanam, it is called eradication of dukkha by the eradication of avidya. This itself is kaivalya. That is the third topic in the dukkha chadurvyuha, the quadrangle of dukkha, is the eradication of dukkha by eradication of ignorance, avidya. The fourth one is hanopaya, means of eradication of dukkha. The unbroken practice of Viveka-khyati, which exists in 7 stages. We will discuss that later. So this should be kept in mind as a background. So in the last class we discussed the 13th sutra of Sadhanapada, Sati Mule Tad Vipako Jati Ayur Bhoga. When so long as this klesha continues, this klesha will reach the phala prati, phala vipaka, fruition. Whatever we have done, that action will produce an unseen potency, a possibility, which is unseen, but it will remain with us, and sometime in future, it comes back to you. As I said earlier, this is interpreted in so many ways among the Mimamsakas and also Vedantins. The simple explanation is this: whatever we do, any action, it produces an immediate, visible, tangible result. When you do harm to a person, when you try to do injustice to a person, the immediate result, the tangible, visible result is that person gets hurt or injured. That's one thing. This is at the micro level, very visible. At the invisible level, which is part of the macro, universal, cosmic effect of what we do, this action produces something which is not visible. It's called adrishtam, means invisible, not visible. Oh, apurvam, that's another word. This really means it did not exist before you did that. You hurt a person, and that act of doing harm to a person produces an unseen, invisible, but very intensely felt and experienced potency, possibility. It is called potency or possibility because it is going to take the form of a real consequence in future. So that remains, that is created. It did not exist earlier. For that reason, it is called apurvam. That means it did not exist earlier. Adrishtam, it's not visible. Now, after some time, it may act in too many ways, so many ways. It may act, this undesirable action on our part becomes a tendency and may prompt us to repeat such undesirable action. That is one thing. And again, that undesirable action may become part of the cosmic phenomenon. It's called the macro result. It becomes a cosmic phenomenon, and when you die, when you're reborn, it comes back to you. It is stored somewhere. Where it is stored, it remains there. And when you are reborn, there is a concordance. To be more precise, combining astrology, astronomy, and Vedanta and Yoga, your birth is decided by what you do, according to Vedanta and Yoga. If you are led a good life, done good actions, then we are likely to be born in a good family, to parents place or in a culture where you can continue your good actions. And those parents also must have done some good deeds to deserve to have daughters or sons, depending upon the case, good persons to be born. If they have not done anything, any good deed, if they have done only undesirable things, then accordingly undesirable persons will be born to them as sons or daughters. It is not predeterminism. The adrashta apurva, this potency theory extends far beyond. It also extends the realm of transmigration from birth to birth. So, that is an important point. That's why the sati mule tat vibhago jati ayur bhoga. Then, the deciding factor, punya apunya hedutvad. Te klada paritava phalaha punya apunya hedutvad. That's means here. Depending upon good action or bad action, it can impact, it can influence your future life. We are beginning with the 15th sutra of Sadhanapada, which is very important. So that's the beginning of the discussion of Dukkha Chadurvyuha, which is called the quadrangle of Dukkha. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaga. It's a long sutra. I shall explain this. The first word is parinama dukkham. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. The simple meaning is this. Everything ends in dukkha. So there are different types of dukkhas. Dukkha doesn't necessarily mean grief or tragedy, concerns. It could be in the form of concerns, anxieties. That's all dukkha. What are the forms of dukkha? One, you tried to get something, you didn't get it. It leads to dukkha or concern, unpleasant experience. And if you get something but not enough, then also it is an unpleasant experience. If it is more, then also it could be unpleasant experience. And then even if you get everything perfectly fine, the richest man also loses his sleep because he fears the stock markets may collapse any day. There is a crisis in the European Union economic, then also he loses his sleep. So all these produce some kind of concerns. Oh no, there are different types of dukkha here. The idea of quadrangle is common not only in yoga but also in ayurveda. If you in the ayurveda, ancient Indian school of medicine, there are 4 elements forming a quadrangle. One is roga, which means illness, the disease. The second is roga nidana, which means the cause for roga, the cause for sickness. Roga nivritti is arogya, which means getting rid of the illness. Then aushadha means the method, the remedy for this illness. So this quadrangle idea extends beyond yoga. It's found in the realm of ayurveda also. So similarly in yoga, what is disease? Disease, the disease of being born in this world and interpreting ourselves to be the psychophysical mechanism and being enslaved by the senses and the vagaries of senses, the vagaries of mind, and being spiritually and psychologically enslaved by the changing happy experiences, both happiness and unhappiness, like a tiny boat that is tossed about in the mighty waves of an ocean. So this is the disease that is called samsara dukkha. And according to yoga, that is also Sankhya philosophy, the way out of this dukkha is Prakriti Purusha Samyoga, which really means we now think we are part of Prakriti. We are an evolute of this dead Prakriti. So long as we interpret ourselves to be the physical body, and so long as our concern doesn't go beyond this body, so long as the least and as the most insignificant worldly sensations or problems affect our mind, upset our mind, we are just part of this evolute, one of the evolutes of Prakriti. Now, when we realize that we are actually, our true nature is Purusha himself, the conscious reality, then this disease is gone. So, that is Heya Hetu, and Hana means this liberation, samsara nivritti. That means Viveka-khyati, or proper understanding. So, the whole subject is dealt with in the second chapter, Sadhanapada, from 16th to 26th pada. The whole topic is discussed in this Yoga Sutra. Now we will elaborately discuss this subject. We can come to the sutra. So please remember, the first sutra, that is 16th sutra. The other begins 15. We should begin with 15th. Sutra as a background is, as I said, parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. To a person of true discrimination, proper understanding, everything is sorrowful because of the suffering resulting from the changeable nature of things. Remember, this is only for those who have viveka. Why the world is something problematic? It's because we have attained a higher level of cultural, spiritual evolution. That's an important point, remember. The fact that we consider there is a dukkha, that this empirical, worldly, physical existence by itself is a state of imperfection, is a cause of dukkha, shows that we have started opening our eyes. So, that is a very important point, remember. That's why, Vivekinaha is an important word in the sutra. For a person of discerning mind, for a wise person, for a wise man or wise woman, what is dukkha? What is suffering? The changeable nature, the changefulness of different experiences. As I said, when we get something, we become happy, and then we are anxious to keep that happiness intact, so we'll be anxious to keep it, so we'll be concerned about losing it. And if we don't get the right thing we want, we become unhappy. So this changeable nature of different things also makes our mind a slave of sensory experiences. This is seen and interpreted as a state of imperfection by the wise person. So that is an important point, remember. We are all discussing yoga here. We have assembled to discuss yoga here because we are comparatively enlightened people. Otherwise, there are much better things for people to do. But people find time to discuss yoga. And so they find out, well, these changeable sensory phenomena, things of a few minutes, they do not constitute the highest reality. There is something essentially, intrinsically imperfect in this empirical phenomena, which come and go. So we consider this as a state of imperfection. Now, how does this really happen? There are in fact, we have to read some of the commentators to get a full understanding of this problem. Because how to begin spiritual life and how to continue spiritual life, these two problems are also discussed in this context. You find if you discuss among your friends, spiritual fellow travelers, you find most people face two types of problems. One, how to begin. Second, how to continue. Now, a proper understanding of the real nature of the empirical phenomena will help us to begin and also to continue. So there is an interesting discussion in Vyasa's commentary. Vyasa writes, Ya bhogeshu indriyanam truptehi upashantihi ya indriyanam laulyat anupashantihi tat sukha. Here Vyasa defines what is dukkha, what is sukha. Sukha is the opposite of dukkha. Dukkha means unhappiness, grief, sorrow, state of imperfection, state of concern, anxiety, and so on. Sukha is opposite. So the great commentator Vyasa gives a very, very rational, scientific definition of what is sukha means happiness, and what is grief, what is dukkha. So he says, when through gratification, the thirst for enjoyment things, the senses are calmed. Suppose we reach a state where the senses do not seek for external objects for enjoyment. The senses are in a state of tranquility, peace, kind of inner contentment. Then they do not go out. Every moment when the senses go out, they go out in search of certain things to enjoy sensory pleasures. So if the senses are in a state of perfect tranquility, peace, if they do not move out, if they do not have any thirst or gratification for enjoyment, then they are in a state of perfect happiness. And what is its opposite? Grief, restlessness of the senses due to a thirst, an insatiable thirst for enjoyment or sensory pleasure. That is Dukkha. Now, this is very, 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 very important. Remember, according to Vyasa, Ya bhogeshu indriyanam truptehi upashanti. That's sukha. When indriya senses reach a state of perfect gratification, calmness, they do not go out in search of external enjoyments, we are happy. That's true. When are we really happy? We feel happy when our senses are not running out of our mind. See how you can, I'll give many examples. You listen to music. If you are really a fan of music, you become immersed in that music. So all the five senses of perception and mind are focused on that. They do not run away, run out in sense of other enjoyments, things. They merge, they become one, they become identified with the music that's going on in front of you. Or if you are a fan of art, you go to an art gallery, you look at a great master's work, classic, and you completely forget everything. Or if you are a spiritual seeker, you pray and you forget everything. If you meditate and you forget everything. At that time, we are in a state of perfect upashanti. Senses are completely controlled in a state of calmness and quiet. On the other hand, you become perturbed. You become highly disturbed. Especially when you are in a state of shock and excitement. Eyes are restless. Mind is restless. Whole body shakes and trembles. It's opposite because senses are running away in all directions. So Vyasa says, Indriyanam truptehi. Truptehi means Krishna Kshaya, means complete cessation of desire. All desires gone. That is true. When you are immersed in music, your desire for food may be, there will be no desire for food in your mind, not desire for anything else in your mind. When you meditate, when you pray, any of these experiences. On the other hand, ya indriyanam laulyan anupashanti tat sukham. When indriyas, senses, drag the mind away in all directions, then you become restless. It is dukkha. In fact, the worst problem for every thinking human being is lack of mental peace. People would rather exchange everything for getting some mental peace. Now, how do the senses get distracted towards different objects? A clue to this is found in the famous text Gita. In the second chapter, the 62nd verse, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Ubajayade Sangha Sanjayade Kamaha Kama Krodho Bhijayade Krodha Bhavadi Sammoha Sammoha Smriti Vibhramaha Smriti Vibhramshat Buddhinasha Buddhinasha Pranashide is a graphic description of how a person's mind gets distracted towards external objects, and it leads to complete degeneration, intellectual and psychological degeneration. Loss of peace of mind leads to complete the kind of mental restlessness. Now there are two views as to how senses get distracted. This verse itself gives these two views. One is, often our senses, driven by the mind, go in search of certain sensory pleasures. That is one view. Both are correct. If you are looking for some object of enjoyment, you are caught, you are trapped. That's one way. The other one is, mind naturally gets drawn towards what is available. That is also a reality. See, often you find some people will tell you, oh, the media have no role in educating modern human beings. It's a view there. But media do have an important role to play. Media can present good things before educated people. Then there will be a tendency for people to get drawn towards those positive objects. So both are correct. Mind sometimes goes in search of what it wants, and frequently mind learns to want what is available in the external world. Now, how this really happens, Ramanujacharya is a great Vaishnava philosopher. He has written a commentary. So he says, Dhyayodo Vishayan Pumsaka Punarabi Sangha Ati Pravruddho Jayati Sangha Sanjayade Kamaha Kamo Nama Sangasya Vipaka Desha Purusho Yam Disham Apanno Vishayan Abhuktva Sthadum Nashaknodi Sakamaha. What is desire and how desire creates suffering? Dukkha is mentioned here. So long as we have a strong desire for something, and so long as the mind has reached a stage where it cannot have peace, a little peace without enjoying what it sees. Yam Bisham Apanno Vishayan Abhuktva Sthadum Nishaknati. You are not able to live for a moment without enjoying what you are seeking. So the senses enslave our mind. And when the senses are able to enslave our mind, what happens? We go for it. If we don't get it, we become restless, we become angry. Kama Krodho Vijayada, the Gita says. And when we become angry, when we become anxious, when we lose our balance, slowly mind comes down. That's how mind slowly loses its sukham, happiness, and becomes a slave of dukkha or grief. This is Vyasa's clear statement. So, how to get out of this? That's the subject that is going to discuss here. Sometimes some people make a terrible mistake of feeding the mind with what it wants. That is true in education, now education policy. Whatever the child wants, you give it here to him or to her. I am not an advocate of spare the rod and spoil the child policy. The point is, at one level, at one stage, we should be able to give proper direction to the young generation. So the idea of feeding the mind, thinking that mind will become happy, mind will become contented, satisfied, if it gets what it wants, is totally wrong according to Yoga and Vedanta. So there's a famous statement, Na jadu kama kamanam upabhogena shamiti habisha krishnavadmeva bhuya eva abhivarthade. It's a famous statement. Very interesting. Of course, this has something to do with spiritual life, much more important. But in a way, it is just universal truth. We should never try to please the mind by supplying whatever it desires, whatever it wants. Mind never becomes happy that way. An example is given here. Suppose blazing fire. You try to put out a fire by pouring ghee or clarified butter. The more and more clarified butter, ghee that we pour in the fire, it starts blazing much more ferociously. It needs some other kind of thing to be put there, for the fire to be put out. So, one important point that yoga philosophers, commentators, again and again emphasizes, we should be able to say no to our mind. That's the beginning of yoga, that's the beginning of spiritual wisdom. It doesn't mean that we should become over ascetic, we should become negative. It's a chitta vritti nirodha is not a dissolution of mental faculties. It is the cessation of the modification of our sense of self with all the emerging, fleeting, changing external phenomena. That's what it means. So, it is not a kind of dry asceticism. What it means, we should be able to supply our mind with what it wants, what it seeks, but also we should be able to say no to our own mind in certain cases. That's the beginning of spiritual wisdom. Because the great commentator Shankaracharya also refers to an important quotation from Mahabharata. Yaccha kama sukham loge yaccha divyam makha sukham trishna kshayasya syedi narkada shodashim kalam is a very interesting statement. So, well, there's some word is missing here. Yaccha kama sukham loge yaccha divyam makha sukham trishna sukhasya eti narkada shodashim kalam. The meaning is this. The sense pleasure obtained in this world and the higher pleasure that you obtain even in heaven are nothing compared to the pleasure that you enjoy by controlling the senses, by attaining a state of desirelessness. That's the idea behind. So, that's why Naja Indriyanam Bhoga Abhyasena Vaitrishnam Kartum Shakyam is a famous statement in Vyasa's commentary. Vyasa makes this point very clear. Indriyas should not be pampered and mind should not be pampered. We must be able to say no to indriyas and also mind So this is the first important sutta.